Hello, everybody. Welcome to the RSN wrap-up show here in our beautiful Centier Bank Studios. I'm Jack Theo. Alongside me will be Mike Jamia. We have all our final scores here, the games we've been keeping track of. Of course, I want to remind everybody we do have 3 Saturday games tomorrow, so if you're wondering where those scores are at, we'll try to fill those in tomorrow. But reminder, those games that you're looking for, it's on our hometown scoreboard, courtesy of our friends from Strack Van Til. That is going to be on Saturday's games. So we'll go to our tonight games. We'll start with the Culver Cavaliers and South Central Satellite. South Central winning 44-22. One of our region games that we were focusing on. Lowell gets their first win at the Inferno. They defeat LaPorte 26-7. Michigan City bounces back and gets their first win of the year. They win 36-30 against the Bronchos. We go to the River Forest Ingots. They win 33-0 against Calumet Warriors. A good win for them. They're 2-0 now. Might make their way up into our RSN top 10. They were on the bubble, and a chance for them to get into that top 10. The Munster Mustangs get their first win of the year. Good job by Coach Grunwald. They defeat Griffith 41-33. The Highland Trojans 2-0 for the first time in, I believe, 7 years. They win 46-7 in Whiting. As we flip our page, we'll go over as Hanover. They are still undefeated. They defeat Hammond Morton 24-14, and I believe, we'll kind of have a little conversation here about this one, but even though we talk about you won a lot by losing, you got to credit to Hammond Morton. This was a team that we said could be sneaky, and you said, remember, Hanover can score, and holding them to 24 points, making this a close game, it's kind of like one of those hidden wins for Hammond Morton in a way.
You know what it is? It's the second half.
Yeah.
They played great in the second half. And they were down 14-0, at halftime, third and fourth quarter. They were able to get a couple touchdowns on the board.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, they won the second half, 14-10.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one of those things you just build off of that against a really good team, a Hanover team, only holding them to 10 points in the second half. Not many people can say they've done that in the past couple of years.
I'm sure they can use this game as some momentum going in, knowing that they've got themselves a really good defense. And they already showed that they have a good offense last week in their win. So we'll see how they bounce back next week. Lake Station Eagles, they fall to West Central 58-10. IC Catholic Prep defeats Bowman Academy 47-0. One of our game nights presented by Von Tobel. Valpo defeats Andrean 55-18. They now move 1-1 with a big matchup coming up. Hobart couldn't get the job done. The Maryville Pirates defend their home field 31-12, and Maryville, another good win by them. We talked about they had people coming back. We're not 100% sure if they played in tonight's game, but a big game now next week between probably our number 1 and number 2 team, the Crown Point Bulldogs, and the Maryville Pirates.
Yeah, Maryville getting a good win at home. They played great in the first and second quarter. They went up 24-6 at halftime. They were able to hold on the rest of the way and just do what they were supposed to do. We talked about it in our little show previously that we had, and talked about up front in the trenches, like Maryville got it done to start. They ran power out of a spread set on offense, and their defense, their front four is just really good. And so, it's going to be interesting to see what they got in store next week. Yeah,
and another team that had a really good win, one of our third games by our game nights by Von Tobel, Crown Point, 49-7. They have a large score differential. They've only given up 14 points in the 2 games and have scored over 90 points out in the offense. Their quarterback, Noah Ehrlich, another fantastic game for him. Definitely what you want to see from your QB with that next week ahead. But still, Crown Point showing they're dominant. They got that home game against Maryville. I'm sure this is a game that a lot of people are going to start talking about, but back to Crown Point. 2 dominant wins, and maybe these aren't wins that tested them. It still shows that this is a really good football team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they went up 28-0 at the end of the first quarter. We talked about in all phases how great that they play on offense, on defense, special teams. We talked about a blocked punt in the first quarter, which gave them a short field, which then they immediately scored on. I think it was a 10 or 12-yard pass to Landon Delich. Later in that first quarter, he busts one out for 58 yards. They're running the ball. They're doing everything. We talk about the 3-5-3 defense that they play, multiple fronts. It's so hard to get blocking assignments, figured out against this Crown Point team, and Coach Bazia's got his team just buzzing right now, going in to play Maryville, and it's going to be an interesting game to see
Yeah.
how, because now it's like you're going to get tested against a team that you would think knows Crown Point, but it seems like nobody has been able to figure out this Crown Point defense. So we'll see what Maryville does against this Crown Point Bulldogs team. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a battle of 1 and 2.
And you better believe that is going to be one of our RSN game nights built by Von Tobel, Maryville at Crown Point. So if you're already circling that one on your calendar, Region Sports has you covered. Now we go to Lake Central. They lose their first game of the year against Providence Catholic, 28-21. We talked about how we heard from Dave Melton. Lake Central had the ball at their Providence Catholic 5-yard line in the middle of the fourth quarter to tie the game, but a turnover on downs. Providence Catholic got the ball back and basically ran the clock out and made it hard for Lake Central to get that win. So they fall to 1-1. It's tough for them because, sometimes playing those Illinois schools, it's a little different. That was their first game of the year. Providence Catholic has always been a good opponent, in the Illinois high school football. So for Lake Central, although it is a loss, I think that they have to feel pretty good that they kept this one pretty close. It was 28-14, but they made that late comeback, but unfortunately couldn't complete that full comeback. We'll go to Boone Grove. They get their first win of the year. They defeat South Bend Clay 53-6. Kankakee Valley, I believe that's one of our next RSN game nights built by Von Tobel next week. I could be wrong, but they defeat Wheeler 33-14. We talked about earlier the Warsaw Bearcats defeat Chesterton 8-6, another tough loss for Chesterton on a field goal. This time it came with 25 seconds to go, a 40-yarder by Warsaw. And the Tigers, another gritty win. They're 2-0 on the year now, and Chesterton now falls to 0-2. Northwood Panthers, they defeat Portage and the Indians 49-7, a game you were kind of talking about. I know, we kind of laughed about saying keep them to 60, but at the end of the day, that's what they did. And for Portage, like you said, although it's a loss, it's a sour taste, but holding a team as good as Northwood, you still are able to build some confidence knowing that your defense showed up a little bit. We've seen Northwood put up, like you said, as much as 60 points against so many other opponents, but for Portage to only give up 49, and I know that rivalry game against Lake Central, I'm sure that they're able to leave that game, obviously not happy with the result, but definitely a lot of things they can work on and improve on and going into practice this week.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that Portage Lake Central game is going to play out. Yeah. I think that's going to be a game where it's going to be a game of coaching, I think, is going to be one. I think it's going to be a game where you're going to have to make adjustments at half. I mean, it's going to be one of those tough games where that your guys are going to give everything that they have.
Yeah.
But it's going to come down to execution, and I don't know how Portage is going to do against the run against Lake Central. That's going to be tough, and if they can't stop the run, everything else is just going to be a whole lot harder to do. But if Portage can find a way to maintain Xavier Williams as much as humanly possible, it could be a closer game than many people are expecting, especially with Lake Central coming off a loss. It's gonna be an emotional game where they're gonna feel that they're gonna really need to get one there. And if things don't go their way, I'm curious to see how it's gonna play. I think both teams are disciplined. I think both teams have a good temperament, but we're gonna see it all play out in a rivalry game next week.
Yeah, Xavier Williams had one of his better games as an Indian against Portage last year. He had 2 touchdowns tonight for them. People don't know, Mike went to Portage. I went to Lake Central, so a little rivalry on the mics tonight. Just kidding, but it'll be definitely a good matchup, Indians versus Indians. And then our last final score, the Rensselaer Central Bombers defeat North Newton 53-0. Those are all your Week 2 scores here. And, of course, if you want to go back, you, of course, listen to this, or you can go to our hometown scoreboard, courtesy of our friends from Strack Van Til. So, Mike, I want to kind of go over this week. What was one game that caught you by surprise in terms of the result?
In terms of the result, let's see. Well, I'll say in terms of the score, I mean, I didn't think that we would see a 8-6 game today.
That is the truth. When do you ever see that? So.
Yeah, but in terms of result, I mean, South Central, I was happy to see them win. I didn't know a whole lot about Culver going into this one.
Yeah.
But South Central, I was glad to see them win. Michigan City, I think that's a big win for them.
Absolutely, yeah.
Especially being 0-1 and Lafayette being 0-1. And you're going to have to go to the road and play Lafayette Jeff at Lafayette Jeff. I'm not saying that I know Michigan City is a good team, or at least I believe they are. But nothing really surprised me a whole lot. But some of these scores did a little bit, right?
Yeah, I think, Highland was surprising for me. I thought that would be a lot closer than it was.
Yeah, the score, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I expected Highland to win that game, but to win 46-7 after their close call last week against Griffith, I assumed it might have been closer because Whiting had themselves a big win as well last week. So I was surprised to see that Highland, I mean, they're ultimately winning 46 or nothing. Whiting scored a last-minute touchdown. So, I expected Highland, our number 8 team on our RSN rankings, to win, but by that much, I was expecting a little bit of a barn burner. I was calling it like one of those games that to grind out, and for Highland, I mean, they didn't really have to grind out much. They had an early, huge lead in that first half, so definitely Highland, and we're definitely going to have a lot of shakeup in our top 10. Morton, number 10, they fall. We'll see with Hammond Central. They play tomorrow. They're number 9. Highland, number 8. Michigan City, number 7. Those teams won, so we'll see where they go. And, of course, Lake Central, number 6. They fall. Hanover Central now 5. They have to win. Valpo, number 4, wins. Our number 3 team in Hobart loses. I think it's safe to assume Crown Point and Maryville will stay as 1 and 2. Probably could say Valpo will move into the number 3 spot, and maybe Hanover moves to 4. I think that we could also potentially see a Michigan City team slide into where Lake Central was. I'll be curious to know if they stay in the top 10, but LaPorte, who was on the bubble, they lost. And, for River Forest, they were on the bubble and they won. So maybe River Forest makes the rankings. Lowell was also on the bubble, so I'll be curious to see if they enter our top 10 rankings. But there's going to be a lot of shakeup, throughout the week with the rankings. And, we've obviously talked about one of our, game nights built by Von Tobel and Crown Point and Maryville, and that's going to be the one to watch. And obviously we'll talk about that more next week on our Football Weekly show. Of course, our RSN Kickoff show as well next week. But overall, it's been, one of those weeks where, maybe there's a lot of games that weren't close, but there's also a lot of games that were close and told us a lot about some teams. It's only week 2. That does not determine the football season just yet. You can still learn a lot. We've seen teams go 0-2 and go on some great runs. So teams are still trying to figure out their identity. Maybe some players haven't been able to play yet. So, I don't think when you look at a team that's 0-2 that they're maybe that record. They probably play better than that record. So, week 3 is kind of when you get into this team is going to be in this spot, or this team might not be, at the end of the season when it comes like the regionals, semi-state, and et cetera. So I think, after week 3, we'll be able to tell which teams are going to be at the top and which teams are going to have some work to do.
Yeah, I going back a little bit to like the rankings, I don't know how far Hobart falls.
Yeah.
Because they lost to Maryville at number 2, and they're 1-1 on the season. Valparaiso, when we talk about the scores, that one kind of surprised me a little bit in the sense that how much they beat Andrine by.
Absolutely.
They were up 41-12 at halftime, and so I thought it would be like maybe a 20-point game, but they obviously did more than that. So impressive there. Hanover, that's a big win, so it's like they make a case. So, I mean, if Hobart is to fall, they fall probably to 6. That's if they fall, and I don't know. We'll see how the RSN rankings shake out. But, Lake Central losing, that's a tough one for them because, with Hammond being with Hanover being the 5th best team or 5th ranked team and Valparaiso being the 4th ranked team, both getting victories, you kind of wanted to hold the pace there. But you find yourself probably dropping in the rankings there with 4 and 5 winning and Hobart losing at 3. So we'll see. But it's going to be all interesting. But I think you make a good point about where these teams are going to be and how things are going to begin to kind of visualize. And as we see the season play out after week 3, Lake Central is going to be one of those teams where 1-1 going to play Portage. You're going to have to make a statement game if you want to really climb that ranking again because you're going to fall a little bit. So that's going to be an interesting game. Hammond Morton with another big win, they can find themselves back into the top 10 in the event that they hop out, which they're the 10th team and they lost by 10. So, it's reasonable to expect that is a possibility. So we'll see with that. But, the next week, Crown Point, Maryville 1-2, that's just going to be a great game, and I can't wait for it.
Yeah, you have 2 dynamic quarterbacks in Dante Pope and Noah Ehrlich. I mean, 2 of the best quarterbacks in the region. You got a guy like Noah Ehrlich who can throw the ball as good as anybody, and Dante Pope, who can do both. He's an electrifying runner, but when you need him to throw the ball, he can do that for you. So definitely going to be a battle at QB, and I can't wait to watch that one. Any other final thoughts before we wrap up the RSN wrap-up show, Mike?
No, I just think that it was one of those weeks where a lot of the teams that we thought would pull away and get victories did. Some of the spreads surprised us a little bit, but the thing is it's all about what you do moving forward from here. The first 2 weeks of the season does not define who you are. Mm-hmm. It's not about how well you're playing now. It's about how well you play at the end of the season.
Absolutely.
Right? Everyone's going to get into that sectional. Everyone's going to get an opportunity to do something in the postseason, and it's just a matter of learning right now. And some teams, are hitting the ground running, and some teams are licking their wounds a little bit. Yeah. But in a month or two, we're going to see a whole different team, when it comes to a lot of these clubs.
Absolutely. Well, big thank you to James Chalos for being our producer for our multiple shows throughout this Friday night. And also a big thank you to Suntier Banks for this beautiful studio. But for Mike Jamia, I'm Jack Thiel, as you're watching the RSN Wrap-Up Show here on the Region Sports Network, the only game in town.